Hey, I am so glad that you joined us here today. The whole heart of Hope for Your Home is to bring national experts into your home to add value to you in this season. And what prompted this in my heart was obviously there's a health crisis and a financial crisis going on, but I believe that there's impact on the home. And so we want to add value to you, and we want to help bring practical ideas on how we can navigate this season in the home. And so in just a moment, I'll introduce today's guest. But we have an incredible guest coming up next week with Lynette Lewis, going to talk a little bit more about the business side of things and how we can keep our dreams alive even in this season. And then we have our marriage counselors, Tim and Ann Evans, the following week with marriage. And so I just want to encourage you, tune in every single week. And if you miss one, you can go online at thrivechurch.com and you can see past episodes. But again, I want to tell you to get involved. Don't stay isolated in this season. Yes, social distancing, but not social isolation. Jump in a Thrive group or start helping when it comes to outreach. We're so excited about all that's happening with outreach right now and just really an explosion of serving the community. There's so many ways that you can get involved. But today, we have an incredible guest. It is Dr. Tim Elmore, and he has invested his life into really helping parents, coaches, teachers on how to really get the most out of this next generation and pour value into the next generation. And I've had a relationship with him for over 10 years. He is an unbelievable national speaker, and he is going to crush it today. And so I just want you to open up your heart, get a pen and paper ready, and I believe that he's going to help us know how to get the most out of this moment with our kids at home. Let's welcome Dr. Tim Elmore.
Dr. Tim, it is such an honor to have you here today investing in our church, and really means the world to me. You have meant the world to me for so long, and it really is an honor to have you here. How are you doing? How's your family doing?
Well, first let me say, Jacob, I'm honored to be with you. I think the world of you and your family and Hannah, and I'm proud of what you've done at Thrive. So I'm honored to be with you.
Man.
So my wife, Pam, and I are doing great. It's been a kind of a neat breather. We know it's very horrific for many, many people, but fortunately I'm really good friends with my wife. So I'm locked up with a good friend.
That's good.
So we're having a blast. We're cleaning our house. We're reading, planning, getting some more time just to think together and laugh together. So it's been good.
Yeah. So good. Well,
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to have you invest and I just know you have expertise in so many areas, but also just your heart to really help the next generation. And
Yeah.
I really feel like that's of such high value. So here's the first question to get going here is how should we approach our family and our kids during this time differently than we would normally?
Well, I think it's good for us moms and dads, especially, to remember that while we have never experienced anything quite like COVID-19, our kids have certainly never experienced it, and they're still forming. So their brains are still developing, and this may come across as absolutely stressful for them, even more so than for us. And you and I were just talking about how it's a little stressful for grownups, or is our job still going to be there? And how about my income and so forth? So it might be helpful for parents to know that Generation Z, which are the kids that only remember the 21st century, they only remember a day with a smartphone in their hand, have already experienced high anxiety levels. Dr. Robert Leahy, a cognitive behavioral therapist, said as we moved into the 21st century, the average teenager in America experiences the same level of anxiety as a psychiatric patient did in the 1950s. So it's just crazy to think that life looks this way for so many. And by the way, that's not just middle school, high school. That's as early as elementary school kids. They're thinking about their grades and what about this and what about that. And of course, if they've got a smartphone, they're exposed to adult information way earlier than they're ready. So I would say to moms and dads, just remember you're talking to probably a little bit of a stressed out kid, even if they're coping with their stress through TikTok and whatever, Instagram, they're probably stressed out. So a couple of thoughts I have that are, I think, practical. As a parent, I'm commonly thinking we need to check three things as we lead our kids. Number one is our motives. Are we offering words and direction out of worry or wisdom?
Wow.
And I know that sounds kind of cliche, but here's what I mean. For years and years and years, moms and dads have said to our children when they're playing outside, don't play in traffic, you'll get hit by a car.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why we run to that picture, I do not know, but it's worry. It's worry motivation, Why couldn't we say, hey, when you're outside, look both ways. It's actually wise to stay away from traffic. That's a wisdom motivation. And the narrative in their head is now, oh, I always want to be wise, not I always want to be worried.
Wow.
I think Philippians 4 says, be anxious for nothing. So I think we need to check what's our motive, worry or wisdom. They can sense worry and wisdom a mile away.
So good.
The second thing I'd say, Jacob, is we need to check our message. Is it based on fear or facts? Now, let's be honest. If we're watching the news all day long, we can't help but get a little fearful, hearing all the news in China and Italy and here. So I would this is just me, I'm suggesting I watch about 30 minutes of news in the morning. I get the update and I'm on to what I need to do because I don't need that stuff to cloud what I know to be true. So I always want to base it on facts, not fear. And I would just suggest limit the news. We don't need to hear every single thing that's being said for 8 hours. That's often clickbait. You and I both know that instead of real facts. And then the last thing, Jacob, real quick, is our foundation. Do we lead out of panic or principles? Jacob, you know me. For years, I have believed we've got to lead off of principles. And really, you and I believe there's truth in these principles. They're biblical. So if I'm a dad or a mom leading out of principles, it doesn't change even in COVID-19. It's still principles that we're leading by. This is what we believe. This is what we know. This is the rules that govern our household. And when our kids see it doesn't change, even when times are scary, it just adds a level of security. So one last thought, and I know I'm rambling here, but this might be helpful.
No,
I remember hearing somebody say maybe a week ago, the phrase was going around, we're all in the same boat here. We're all in the same boat wherever you live. And to that, I would say we are all in the same boat, but we're not all in the same storm. For some of us, it's a light sprinkle, like I just said, my wife and I are having a good time here. It's kind of a breather. For some, it's really a storm. I mean, they are watching the news all day and it's scary and they're wondering about the future and their income. And for others, it's just an outright hurricane. I mean, they've either lost their job or they know somebody that's been affected, or they know somebody that's even died from this. So I think we've got to lead with empathy and compassion, and maybe know that the worst might be going on inside of our children or our neighbors. That's just not that bad for us. And we need to stop saying, well, it's not that bad. I don't know what you're all wrestled up about. We need to say, maybe it is, and we need to hit our knees.
Right. So. That's so good. That's so good. I appreciate that. And so Hannah and I, we're working from home, and she's homeschooling the kids. I'm leaning in at, sometimes, and it feels like for us, our lives have gotten busier and more stressful. Yeah. I know some friends have lost their jobs, and all of us are facing some added stress in some ways. And just wanted to ask you, what are some of the pitfalls in family that concern you?
Well, one of them is, I think, the level of panic that we display. Panic is natural, it's human, and we are human. But we should be different humans. I know you believe that as a Christ follower and as a pastor. I believe truth prevails over facts even. And I just recommended leading from facts. Facts change. One fact in America is I drive on the right-hand side of the road. If I go to England, I don't drive on the right-hand side of the road. That's not a fact anymore. The truth is universal. And so as pithy and cliche as this sounds, this is a time we've got to go back and say, what is it we know to be true? So, and I know you believe that. I have known you since your college years, and you've lived your life that way. But I think we've got to get that. That's a real pitfall. Another one is, I think because the future is so unknown right now, we get paralyzed rather than we pivot. This is a time we've got to pivot. We've got to say, all right, this is our new reality. And we need to put our leadership hats on. Yes. I'm a fan. and say, all right, and yes, Lord, you're the ultimate leader. Talk to me here, but how do we lead in this pivot time? And I just think that's going to be key, that we really are good at adapting. One metaphor that I like to use, Jacob, is this is a time for adjusting the sails. And I've used that a lot lately because I was supposed to be in Cairo, Egypt right now. And I'm not, obviously, because of the coronavirus. But the last time I was in Egypt, we got into a felucca on our last day there on the Nile River, and we sailed down for about an hour and a half. And that little trip was a great picture for me of this time. There was one sailor on the boat, and there was 8 of us just sitting around enjoying, drinks and food. And because it was a windy day, that sailor was just constantly yanking on the ropes and pushing the sails over and grabbing the poles. And he was a barefoot sailor, so he's running all around for about an hour and a half. He's sweating.
Yeah.
The picture I have in my mind is because the winds were contrary, he could not stop moving. He was pivoting all the time. Not once did he yell at the wind because it wasn't cooperating. Wow. We do that. Not once did he just sit down with us and say, I give up, forget the whole thing, the wind's not helping. Yeah, we do that. What he did was he adjusted the sails. So pessimist, complain, optimist, assume it's going to change. I think leaders adjust the sails, they pivot. So can I just encourage the listeners, wherever you are, leader, parent, uncle, aunt, this is our time to change and adapt. And that's the need of the hour.
Man, that is it's really, really helpful. Thank you so much. So you recently mentioned that a pandemic is a terrible thing to waste. I've thought that was really catchy and also thought-provoking. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so that was a little video and a little article I did. Thanks for bringing that up. That was a fun one. So when this whole thing hit, this pandemic, I started looking up in history how people have responded to influenza, SARS, Ebola, and even ones centuries ago. In 1665, the Great Plague of London hit. In fact, it was part of the greater pandemic that happened back then, the Black Plague. But when this plague hit in London, it was 1665, a young man by the name of Isaac Newton was going to Cambridge University. We all know that name, Isaac Newton. When he was sent home in their own version of social distancing, they knew enough to say we need to get away from each other. He got home, and instead of wasting time as a college student, he makes some of his most important discoveries with nothing going on. So I love this. He, first of all, he came up with his theory on optics. He bought a prism and was looking through it and came up with all his theories on optics, which we still use to this day. Secondly, he actually invented calculus. Now, some of you might say that was bad news, not good news, but he actually comes up with this math course that we now enjoy. And thirdly, get this. Thirdly, he comes up with the laws of motion and the law of gravity. That was when the proverbial apple fell from the tree that we've all heard about. It happened during that plague, and he comes up with his theory of gravity. 1 year later, goes back to school with his theories in hand. Within a year, he's a fellow at the university. Within 2 years, he's a professor. I'd say he did not waste that pandemic. Yeah. So here's what I would say, listeners. How could we take this apparent disadvantage and turn it into an advantage? Yes. How could the problem become a possibility? How could the stumbling block become a stepping stone? And I know this all sounds like such a sermon here, but this is what great people do. This is what great leaders do. And because we serve a God that we believe does this well, why not jump on board? So that's what I meant by a pandemic is a terrible thing to waste. And I think we need to learn how to pivot and go, all right, God, what could we do that we look back and go, I'm so glad that happened to us. Yeah. We would have never fill in the blank than we would have had we gone through this coronavirus.
That's right. I feel like you're giving us a vision for where we could be and what we could do. And it's just so incredible. I feel like there's a temptation to kind of bury our head in the sand and, just not know what to do. And so I really appreciate you're kind of pulling us up and giving us vision for what could be. And I was amazed at how quick you produced helpful tools for parents. I saw this online, growingleaders.com, and I saw these things you created called home chats. And first of all, they were amazing. But could you talk a little bit about the heart behind it and maybe even take us through a couple of them?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for bringing this up. It is free, moms and dads, if you'd like to use them. But we knew families were stuck at home, so that's one thing we knew. We also knew that many moms and dads were not used to, like Hannah is, teaching their children at home. So this was all a new thing. I started joking with my team. I bet you I think within a week or two, many of the parents that think that teacher was a problem down at the school realize, oh my gosh, it might be my son.
Yep. Yep.
One mom talked to me and said, I'm pulling that bumper sticker off my car that said my kid's an awesome kid because,
yes.
because you're now realizing this is hard stuff.
Yeah.
So we knew parents were home. We knew this might give them time to have conversation that they would have never had before. So while of course they're going to play video games and just mess around, we think that weekly or daily chats between family members, moms and dads and kids could be good. So home chats are simply 8 conversation starters. And Jacob, you know this, but we base them on our habitudes. So in case you've never heard of habitudes, listeners, habitudes are images that form leadership habits and attitudes. So we just felt like that was a good one. So yeah, I'll walk you through a sample. So one of the conversations, the image is called trains and tracks. So everybody just picture a train on a track, okay? Wouldn't it be ridiculous for a locomotive train engineer to stop at a train station and just start complaining about how those railroad tracks are just so confining? Can't believe how confining these things are, you know, and he just rags on, I'm going to jump off these tracks. I'm going to take my train up that hill. Well, that would be stupid. We all know that while the tracks are a little confining, they actually accelerate the ability of that train to get to its goal. I think families need tracks. We need systems in place. And when we put systems in place, it doesn't hinder us. It actually helps us get done what we need to get done. So this is a conversation on, okay, what do we need to be doing where we're not just wasting all day long when we finish our schoolwork in 30 minutes. What are the tracks we need to lay? So there's games involved. There's activities that they can play together. We actually give them okay, here's what you can do to create a train track for your time, or a train track for your schoolwork, or a train track for our entertainment time. And of course it's a conversation. So everybody has to do it. Mom and dad don't get to give this instruction and then watch. They've got to create a train track for themselves. So anyway, I'll stop there, but that's just one example of a conversation that can be started that we just think is probably helpful during this time.
My goodness. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. The home chats, I think that's an incredible idea. And yeah, after I've had a great appreciation for teachers these days, and your love for them definitely goes up. And but I think, yeah, filling the time a little bit more intentionally, and that's what I see these as is a real intentional time where we can really coach our kids. So again,
Jacob, could I throw one more thought out real quick?
Oh, I'd love it, even if you want to do 1 or 2 more. Absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
I was just thinking as you were talking, we do appreciate our teachers. I know you all know this, but can you find a way to write a note to a teacher? I'm probably going to get choked up right now, but teachers are heroes. And all the more now. I mean, your wife, Hannah, is a hero. She's teaching and mothering both. I love it when I even hear stories of parents that are taking cakes over to their teacher's house. But I'm also hearing stories, Jacob, of teachers that so miss their students. They're driving by their students' neighborhoods with signs up saying, I miss you. So I love it when I see the humanity come back to all the work that we do and realize we actually love each other. And we do appreciate what we do. So with that said, write a note to a teacher. Secondly, can I encourage you, if you are feeling anxiety right now, just because you're often cooped up in a sedentary place because we're sitting around the house, not able to go practice soccer or whatever, keep moving. Moving will help the endorphins in your body. Maybe your child's needing to practice their spelling words. Why don't you go out and shoot some hoops out the basketball in the driveway, and while you're moving, you're going through the homework. I just feel like keeping moving is going to be good. Stop being sedentary. I think we need to practice mindfulness, a biblical version of mindfulness where we're just stopping. Instead of trying to multitask, we monotask. We focus on one thing, we breathe, and we do it. Paul the Apostle said, this one thing I do, not these 17 things I do. That's the change in Christianity, I think, over the years. So keep moving, practice mindfulness, take advantage of the table. I know you all know this, but can I just say it out loud? The table is where so many good things happen. You can have dinner. You probably are having dinner more often now, instead of eating chicken nuggets in the minivan after Chick-fil-A because you're off to the next practice. Take advantage of having meaningful conversations. My dad turns 90 years old this year. The one thing he keeps saying to me is, the problem with America is we're not eating dinner together anymore. And I'm saying, well, Dad, we can now,
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll stop there, but those are just practical things we can all do, no matter how brilliant of a parent we think we are.
Yes, exactly. That's great. Well, okay. So, so people can go to growingleaders.com/home chats. Do you want to mention any other resources that Growing Leaders provides for parents?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jacob, for asking. This is not a sales pitch, but home chats are for free. So if you went to growingleaders.com/home chats, one word, home chat, you'll find those and you can just download those PDFs. I have short little videos there. One of them is a pandemic is a terrible thing to waste that you can watch with a middle schooler, high schooler and talk about it. But home chats are available there. That's free. My latest book is actually on Generation Z. So if you've got time to read and you want to read the data on this next generation, we have done some primary research. And what we've identified is 9 specific challenges that kids are facing today that we did not face in the past, at least as much as we do today. One of them is anxiety, mental health issues. So there are 9 challenges in this book, and we follow up every single challenge with a solution chapter. So here's the data on the challenge. Here's some research-based ideas that you can practice, all of them aligned with scripture. But this is a book anybody can read. You could give it to your neighbor that maybe is an outsider in terms of faith, and they could go, okay, this makes sense. So Generation Z, the Habitudes books are those books of images that you have, Jacob. So anyway, those would all be things that you can find at growingleaders.com, and we'd be happy to share them with you.
That's so good. Well, I am absolutely just thinking about how you talked about principle, not panic, and so many amazing things that you said. And, as you're talking about this next generation and how there's so much anxiety, I really feel like how we are modeling in that season, are we led by principle or panic in our life? And especially right now, it's just absolutely incredible. And anyways, any last thoughts that are still on your mind that you just would love to share with parents here today?
Yeah, I would just say, don't underestimate the potential of your child. I think we sell kids way too short. In fact, real quick, think with me for a minute. If you go back 100 years ago and you look at childhood and adolescence back then, by the way, the word adolescence had just been invented at the beginning of the 20th century. So it wasn't even a thing until 100 years ago. Do you know what childhood looked like 100 years ago? Get this. 4-year-olds were doing age-appropriate chores around the house. 7-year-olds were working the farm. They had a task to do on the farm. 11-year-olds were leading those tasks on the farm. 14-year-olds were driving cars. 17-year-olds were leading armies in World War I. 19-year-olds were getting married and beginning to have children. Now, I'm not saying we need to go back and do that. I'm just saying it's in these young people to be so much more than people that get lost on Instagram. They can do something. They can do something. Jacob, you're a good example. You and Hannah were out of the gate at ORU doing stuff, and I'm going, oh my gosh, but this is what I believed about you. So parents, do not sell them short and say, well, they just play video games. Well, they do, because that's all you think they can do. So real quick, I love the story of Liam. He lives up in New England. He's about 19, 20 years old. He goes to Yale University, but school let out. Instead of just sitting back and doing nothing, this student received a request. I think his mom or somebody gave him a request. Oh, can you go down the street and help Carolyn? She's 85 years old and doesn't have anybody to go get her food, and she can't get out. So he delivers a meal, gives her a virtual hug, and they start talking. And he goes, oh my gosh, I wonder how many more people like Carolyn there are. He ends up recruiting 1,200 other students, and they're taking food out to shut-ins. So it's the younger generation helping the older generation. Isn't that cool? So all I'm saying is, who knows what could happen if we would take the lid off of the potential that we put on our own kids, because they're just kids, and we say, what could they do to actually change the world? What if we raised the stakes and didn't just give them a artificial assignment, like circle a letter on the multiple choice test? And we said, what if we watched the news and brainstormed what we could do to solve a problem?
Wow.
And ask ourselves, if we were in charge of that, what would we do? Now, if they're 8 years old, they're going to come up with an 8-year-old answer. It may not be strategic, but you get them thinking that way. By 16, they're going to do something significant. By 26, you'll be clapping for them. And when you're 90, they're going to be helping you. So all I'm saying is, let's not sell them short. Now, one last thought. I want to close with a story, and I know we need to wrap this up, but I was talking to a friend of mine that lives in Texas, actually West Texas. His name is Colin. He has 3 boys, and it's a great family, but he was saying, Tim, living in West Texas, our economy always goes up and down based on oil. But he said it's really dropped now based on the coronavirus. So he said, we're in kind of a tough spot. But he told me, he said, my teenage son gave me the greatest compliment accidentally the other day. I said, I got to hear this. And he goes, well, he said, where were we out just talking together, at the house? And he said, Dad, can I ask you a question? Colin said, sure, son. He said, well, I've noticed Mom, she's kind of scared right now, isn't she? And Colin thought for a minute, because he didn't want to throw Mom under the bus, but he said, yeah, son, she's a little scared right now. And it was quiet for a minute. But then Colin's son said to him, but Dad, you're not scared, are you? And Colin said back, no, son, I'm not scared. And his son said, Dad, that's what I needed to hear. And I'm just saying, moms and dads, that's what they need to hear. I'm not scared. We're going to make it through, and we're not even going to make it through. We're going to thrive in this time. And I believe it's possible. I believe we know it can happen. We just need to let it happen.
So good. This has been so extremely helpful. I feel like we could go on for probably an hour or longer, but I just want to say thank you so much. It's such an honor to have you on this chat here today. And I want to encourage parents, please go to growingleaders.com, grab a hold of the home chats. I really think it's going to add value to you. But Dr. Tim, thank you so much. We love you. Hannah and I do, and appreciate you so much.
Well, Jacob, I love you and I love Hannah. Give Hannah a hug for me, and y'all take care of yourselves. Keep washing your hands.
All right, thanks.
Hey, we're so grateful for Dr. Tim to invest in us here today. And I want to pray with you and just believe that God is going to use this time where we can really seize the opportunity and take this crisis situation and really do something incredible in our family. I want to pray for you. God, I pray that right now that you give wisdom to every single family. God, we're not going to get it perfect, but I believe that you're going to give wisdom to every single parent here on how to navigate this season with their kids. So God, I pray that your wisdom will be poured out right now. God, your strength will be poured out right now. And God, I thank you for just an incredible story on the other side of this season, even in the midst of our home. And we honor you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Well, church, thanks again for joining us. Want to encourage you to hang out with us this weekend for church in the series Through. We'll see you this weekend.